The high-pitched screech echoed through the neighborhood just moments before everything spiraled out of control. Karen, self-appointed ruler of the Homeowners Association, came barreling down the gravel path on my ATV like she was starring in a discount stunt show. She stood awkwardly on the seat, one arm raised to the sky like she was summoning a storm, the other clinging desperately to the handlebars, knuckles glowing white. She didn't realize that the machine she hijacked wasn't your average backyard toy. It had been specially modified, enhanced with facial recognition, GPS boundaries, and a self-locking system that didn't take kindly to intruders. And just as she rounded the sharp curve near Lot 17, the ATV decided enough was enough. The wheels locked, the engine cut. Karen soared like a misguided cannonball straight into a swampy drainage ditch, face first. I watched from the comfort of my porch, coffee steaming in my hand, as my security system streamed the entire chaotic show in crystal-clear 4K. But that wasn't even the craziest part. To understand the full spectacle, you'd have to go back 2 days earlier. At that point, things were still somewhat manageable. If you ignored the fact that Karen had recently forced her way into the HOA presidency through an emergency vote, claiming the previous leader was too lenient on rule breakers. Since her rise to power, the neighborhood had been subjected to a constant rain of violation notices, obscure citations, and absurd restrictions. Wind chimes, lawn height, even patio furniture angles, everything was under scrutiny. Then she discovered my ATV. Tucked behind my garage and hidden from street view, it was out of sight but apparently not out of Karen's ever-vigilant paranoia. At the last HOA meeting, she stormed in brandishing a printed photo of it like it was evidence from a crime scene. "This is a threat to neighborhood safety," she announced dramatically. "Children could be tempted to ride it. It encourages recklessness." The room full of mostly silent residents, all of whom knew better than to challenge her, just stared. Calmly, I raised my hand. "Karen, it's on my property. Behind a fence. It hasn't moved in over 2 weeks." Her eyes narrowed to slits. "That doesn't matter," she hissed. "According to the bylaws, page 14, subsection G, we have authority over all recreational vehicles." I had a feeling that wouldn't be the end of it, so I prepared. The ATV was no cheap purchase. It was a high-tech custom project worth nearly $20,000. Military-grade ignition lock, fingerprint start, facial recognition scan that could reject intruders within seconds. I could shut it down remotely, track it, and receive live alerts. I used to joke that it was smarter than some satellites. The morning everything went sideways, I was sipping coffee and checking the forecast when my phone buzzed. Asterisk unauthorized access detected. Facial recognition failed. Asterisk my security feed launched instantly. And there she was, in full view, Karen, wearing a blinding pink velour tracksuit that clashed horribly with my sleek matte black ATV. She climbed on with the enthusiasm of a kid on Christmas morning. I watched in disbelief as she jabbed the ignition. The screen flashed a warning. Override attempt failed. She slapped the controls and somehow the engine roared to life anyway. I tapped my phone's mic. "Karen, what do you think you're doing?" She froze, looked around, then gave my camera the finger like a rebellious teenager. "It's HOA property now," she shouted. "You left it on common land." Then she gunned it, tearing off across yards and trails like she was leading some imaginary crusade. I immediately dialed the sheriff's department, not 911, but the non-emergency line. This wasn't a crisis, but it was definitely illegal. While I was on hold, another alert popped up. Asterisk throttle lockdown initiated. Unauthorized user ejected. Asterisk the ATV's security system had kicked in after 3 failed facial scans. I pulled up the GPS tracker just in time to see the little dot stop abruptly behind Lot 17. Moments later, the live feed confirmed it. Karen, soaking wet and covered in mud, crawling out of the ditch like a cartoon villain who underestimated the hero's gadgets. And I didn't even have to lift a finger. The tiny speck in the distance slowed to a halt. The camera angle changed, revealing Karen mid-scream as the ATV jerked to a stop. Her foot lost traction. Her arms flailed in sheer panic, and gravity took over from there. She crashed hard into a shallow, muddy drainage ditch, the one that always overflowed when the sprinklers went berserk. For a few seconds, she lay still, motionless. Then, like a soap opera diva reborn in dirt and desperation, she sat up, smeared mud from her face with a trembling hand, and unleashed a shriek that echoed like someone had just robbed her of royalty. A jogger happened by, poor soul, and she flagged him down like a castaway on a deserted island. Through dramatic gasps, she ranted about being abducted by dangerous neighbors and abandoned in some suburban jungle. To my surprise, the police showed up quicker than I'd anticipated. Either they were already in the area or someone nearby finally called in a noise complaint. When they arrived, they found Karen slumped on a discarded lawn chair near the ditch, soaked and seething, like some bedraggled general after a lost battle. "He booby-trapped it," she howled, pointing toward the ATV. "That machine tried to kill me." One officer looked skeptical. "You mean the ATV you took without permission and rode across private property?" Karen's eyes darted around like she was searching for a script. "I was securing it, for safety," she claimed. I met them minutes later, calm and collected, armed with a folder of printed logs, security footage, GPS tracking, even facial recognition failures when she mounted the thing. The officers reviewed it and let out a collective sigh. "Ma'am," one began, "you realize this qualifies as grand theft, right?" Karen blinked like the words were in another language. "I'm the HOA president," she snapped. "I was protecting this neighborhood." The officer shook his head. "And the community didn't vote for you to seize vehicles like you're in some Wild West HOA saga." She walked away with only a warning. Asterisk this time star. I didn't press charges. Not because I forgave her, but because I had something far more satisfying in mind. That night, I edited the footage into a tight little highlight reel. No text, no voiceover, just visuals. It opened with her yelling at the last HOA meeting, jumped to her joyriding the ATV, and ended with her airborne fall into the ditch, played in slow motion with an epic orchestral sting. I dropped it in the neighborhood group chat, and the reactions? Glorious. Laughing emojis poured in. The video got reposted to local Facebook pages. It went viral in a cul-de-sac kind of way. Soon, neighborhood kids were mimicking her fall at the bus stop. Someone made a meme. Karen's face on a superhero body mid-flight, captioned, "Karen, enforcer of rules, breaker of tailbones." But Karen? Oh, she wasn't done. Not even close. At the next HOA meeting, she stormed in like a soggy banshee, hair still half wet from the ditch, screeching before anyone even sat down. She slammed her clipboard on the table and jabbed a finger in my direction. "This man is a menace," she barked. People turned slowly, unsure if this was satire, a breakdown, or both. Rick, a fellow board member, tried to calm things down. "Karen, let's sit and review the agenda." But she was already in a frenzy, accusing me of trapping a community use vehicle. The level of delusion was Olympic tier. I said nothing. I didn't have to. The video had done the heavy lifting. Everyone in that room had seen her fly like a chicken with a broken compass. The silence after her rant was thick, until Karen hit us with her grand finale. She proposed a new bylaw. All outdoor equipment over 200 pounds must be registered with the board. Photos, serial numbers, usage statements. For safety. She stared straight at me while saying it, hoping for a reaction. I just leaned back, arms folded, smirking. Rick raised a brow. "You mean we're logging every grill? Every generator? Lawn mowers? Wheelbarrows?" Karen nodded. "If it meets the weight threshold, yes. It poses a theoretical risk." Silence. Then someone from the back muttered, "What even is a theoretical risk?" The room burst into laughter. Her motion didn't stand a chance. What Karen failed to grasp was this. People weren't afraid of her anymore. They saw through the act. She wasn't a protector. She was a tyrant. Instead of apologizing for crashing someone else's property, she tried to double down and legislate it out of existence. Later in the parking lot, neighbors approached me quietly. One woman, June, who'd lived there since the 90s, leaned in and whispered, "She's going to torch this whole HOA just to prove she's right. We need to act." And so we did. Not with pitchforks, but with coffee and bylaws. 3 nights later, we met at Rick's house. No shouting, just calm planning. 6 of us, then 8, then 15. We weren't rebels. We were neighbors tired of being ruled by clipboard. Rick pulled out the HOA rulebook, a massive relic with crinkled pages and dusty corners, and we combed through every inch, searching for the steps to a recall. We'd do it by the book. Civilly, legally, properly. Karen must have felt the tremor in her empire. She started appearing everywhere. Clipboards clutched like shields, eyes sharp like searchlights, taking pictures of backyards, measuring fence heights with a tape measure, issuing citations like she was on commission. 3 warnings in a week went out to families who had never once received a violation. One guy got fined for leaving his trash bin visible 8 minutes past pickup. But we weren't intimidated. We were organizing. And Karen didn't realize the ground beneath her throne was turning to mud. 15 minutes after trash collection, someone else got hit with a citation for unregulated hammock mounting, of all things. Then came the towing incident. I was at work when my neighbor Phil called. "Hey man, there's a tow truck in your driveway." I nearly dropped my lunch. I opened the live feed from my home camera, and sure enough, a battered white tow truck was backing up next to my garage, right where I usually parked the ATV. But the ATV wasn't there. I had moved it into the garage the night before. The driver was actually trying to tow my covered grill and an old dolly with flat tires. And standing right there, barking orders like a traffic controller on a power trip, was Karen. She pointed and shouted like she had every right to be there. I switched to the ATV's built-in security mic. "Step away from the property, Karen," I said through the speaker. She jumped, looked around, and then screamed at the driver to keep going. The moment he tried to hook anything, the garage alarm blared, lights flashed, and the floodlights snapped on. The tow driver panicked, dropped the hitch and peeled out, leaving tire marks all over my lawn. Karen, still yelling, was now screaming at no one. She genuinely thought she was in the right. That footage, it blew up, not just among neighbors, but on HOA horror story forums everywhere. Over 50,000 views. People were tagging it with hashtags like #ATVJustice and #KarenCan'tDrive. Messages started pouring in from other HOA members across the state, offering advice, sharing similar stories, cheering me on. But the best message came from right next door. Rick texted, "It's time. Let's do the petition." We met that same evening with printed signature forms. To trigger a recall vote, we needed signatures from 30% of HOA members. It only took 2 days. People didn't just sign, they rushed to sign. Even the usually quiet, keep-to-themselves types came forward. Karen had crossed a line. She wasn't just an annoyance anymore. She was a threat. People were fed up. She had turned the HOA into her personal kingdom. But now her subjects were revolting. When she found out, she snapped. She went full retaliation mode, issuing fines to everyone who had signed the petition. She dug through years of past violations, mailed out retroactive warnings like candy. Some residents received 5 in a single day. One guy taped them all together and called it his wall of shame. And then she posted a printed list of everyone who signed, right on her front fence. Titled it, "Neighborhood Traitors." That was the tipping point. Rick formally submitted the petition. The recall process had officially begun. In response, Karen declared an emergency community safety inspection and tried to enter my yard without permission. What she didn't know was that I'd upgraded the ATV system again. This time I added a voice recorder. She walked right up to it and muttered something about getting rid of this junk once and for all. Then she tried to peel off a decal, probably thinking it would erase any identifying info. That was it. Her words, on tape, caught loud and clear. It was all I needed. By the end of that week, the HOA scheduled a formal hearing. Karen showed up late, of course. Clipboard in hand, shoulders stiff, chin up like she still ran the place. But the energy had shifted. No more polite nods. People avoided eye contact. A few even turned their backs. Rick sat at the center of the board table and started reading the official list of complaints. Attempted illegal towing, harassment, abuse of authority, and retaliatory enforcement. Karen didn't even blink. When he finished, she stood up slowly and dramatically opened a folder. "I have here over 50 pages of documented violations," she said, tapping the papers like they were holy writ. "Each one of these residents knowingly broke the rules. This is not about the HOA. This is about one man who refuses to respect authority." She locked eyes with me. I didn't flinch. Rick gave me the floor. I stepped forward, calm, and placed a flash drive on the table. "I'd like to enter this audio recording into the official record," I said. "It contains proof of property tampering, abuse of position, and trespassing." Karen's expression finally cracked. Her eyes darted to the board members. They plugged it in and pressed play. Her voice came through, crisp and unmistakable. "I need to get rid of this junk once and for all. No one's going to trace it to me if I peel this off first." Then the sound of her fingernail scraping the decal. The room went silent. You could hear someone shift in their chair. One board member leaned back, arms crossed. Another just stared at the table. Karen? She looked like she'd swallowed her clipboard. The evidence was undeniable. Her reign was collapsing in real time. She had underestimated the one thing that never lies, recorded truth. And the one object she had tried so hard to eliminate, my customized, nuisance ATV, had become the very thing that sealed her fate. Her fingernails scraped along the decal's edge, followed by her muttered hiss. "That smug techhead really thinks he's smarter than me." Everyone in the room recognized the voice instantly. Even the more impartial board members leaned back, eyebrows raised. One woman gasped. Karen looked like she'd been yanked out of a dream and dropped into a courtroom. Mouth agape, hands twitching for an excuse. "I was checking a potential safety issue," she stammered. "I never touched anything. This is all out of context." But no one was buying it anymore. Rick exhaled deeply, rubbing his temples. "Karen, this footage directly contradicts your reports. It doesn't just disprove your version. It reveals intent to tamper." Her facade crumbled. She accused the board of bias, claimed the video was fake, manipulated with AI voice synthesis. That last part drew muffled snickers from the back row. Then came her final act of desperation. She threatened to sue the HOA for defamation if they disciplined her. Rick didn't blink. He simply slid the thick HOA bylaws binder toward her and said, "Feel free to try. Section 4. Article 6 grants us full authority to remove any president who breaches community trust or abuses their position. And that includes trespassing, unauthorized towing, and resident harassment." Karen was suspended from the HOA board that same day, pending a full removal vote. That should have been the end of it. But Karen wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The next day, she filed a civil lawsuit against me personally. She accused me of causing emotional trauma, public embarrassment, and property damage. Her claim? That my recklessly placed vehicle caused her injuries, and that I'd weaponized surveillance tools against her, a so-called public figure. Her attorney? Her cousin Greg, an unlicensed paralegal with a certificate from a sketchy online course and a hobby of suing fast food joints over soggy fries. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so real. They filed actual paperwork at the county courthouse. Still, I didn't flinch. I organized every shred of evidence. Camera logs, system data, video footage. My garage camera had caught the entire incident. From the moment she entered my property to the instant she hit the ground. The metadata was untouched. Even better, the ATV she tried to swipe, it was registered as part of my home-based tech development project. Listed under company equipment, covered by commercial insurance, monitored, and clearly marked as private property. When court day arrived, Karen limped in like she'd survived a monster truck rally. Neck brace, wrist wrap, the whole act. The judge took one look at her, then at the video showing her sprinting and leaping onto the ATV like a teenager at a carnival, and nearly broke composure. Her cross-examination was merciless. "Why were you on his property, Karen? Why did you ignore the verbal security warnings? How does his vehicle's automated stop system make him responsible for your fall?" She had no answers, only blame. Greg objected nonstop, clearly trying to buy time. Every objection was shot down faster than the last. Finally, the judge leaned forward. "Miss Karen," she said slowly, "you are not only wasting this court's time, you're attempting to play the victim after committing an actual crime. This case is dismissed with prejudice. Your lucky charges haven't been brought against you." Karen turned crimson. She opened her mouth to protest. Asterisk bam star. The gavel dropped. But the real storm was just beginning. Within hours, someone had posted a clip of the court footage to Reddit. It exploded. The post, **HOA Karen gets schooled by a smart ATV **, rocketed to the top of the r/entitled people subreddit. The meme of her neck brace side by side with the footage of her ATV stunt went viral. A local podcast invited me to discuss tech-based neighborhood justice. At gas stations, people grinned and asked if I'd sell them a version of my ATV. Meanwhile, our HOA board moved fast. They didn't wait for the scheduled meeting. They sent out a community-wide email announcing a 5-day special vote to formally remove Karen from all leadership. Over 90% voted her out. When Rick read the results aloud, a neighbor popped a bottle of champagne on their porch. "Karen?" She spiraled. She stormed around the neighborhood with stacks of flyers accusing me of cyberbullying and stalking. She tried taping them to every mailbox. Too bad the board had already passed a motion banning unauthorized notices. Every flyer was removed within hours. She still lived in the house, but the clipboard? Gone. The power? Gone. The illusion of control? Shattered. Now, whenever she passed the local playground, kids would rev engine noises and yell, "Facial ID denied." One day, her old clipboard reappeared, replaced with a rubber chicken duct taped to her fence. She didn't laugh. In fact, she rarely left the house anymore. As for me, I got back to living, upgraded the ATV again, added voice recognition and synced it with my home AI. Now, when I walked into range, it chimed cheerfully, "Welcome back, Karen." Not detected. The community was healing. But I knew Karen wasn't done. People like her don't quit, they reload. So I stayed ready. Because if she ever came back, she wouldn't just be facing me. She'd be facing a neighborhood that had had enough. And then, one quiet Sunday morning, my phone pinged. At first, I assumed it was just another motion alert. Maybe a squirrel. Maybe someone walking their dog. But when I pulled up the live feed, there she was. Karen. Hunched in a hoodie and a ridiculous wide-brimmed hat, like she was starring in her own bad spy movie. She crept toward my garage, a plastic bag in one hand, a screwdriver in the other. Same target, the ATV. Same decal. But my system had evolved. Motion sensors? Still there. Voice recording? Active. Now, I had heat mapping, AI threat detection, and real-time face recognition synced with past HOA meeting footage. Karen's face lit up with a red warning border the moment she stepped onto the property. I didn't move, didn't shout. I sipped my coffee and tapped the HOA group chat. Rick and Alicia were already nearby, finishing a visit down the block. I didn't even have to explain. They saw the alert. They knew. They walked straight toward her while she was crouched, laser-focused on prying the decal loose. "Karen?" Rick's voice cut through the air like a command. She jumped as if electrocuted, spinning around, eyes wide, screwdriver clattering to the driveway. Her hand dropped, revealing 3 peeled-off decals and what was unmistakably a stolen neighborhood association sign. She tried to explain, words tumbling over one another. "I was just trying to. These weren't regulation. They violate the visual harmony protocol." "There's no such thing," Alicia replied calmly, raising her phone. "And this is private property. You're trespassing. Again. After being warned. After your suspension. What are you thinking?" Karen straightened up, attempting to reclaim her usual authoritative stance. "I'm the one actually protecting this community," she announced, gesturing toward the ATV like it was a doomsday device. "If I don't step in, who knows what this machine will be used for?" Rick, standing off to the side, looked into the security camera and gave me a subtle nod. That was the signal. I tapped a button on my app, activating the live feed and speaker. My voice carried out across the yard, firm and deliberate. Karen, you've now broken at least 3 new HOA policies, state trespassing laws, and interfered with a registered security system. The entire situation is being recorded and will be forwarded to the county inspector. Again. Please leave the premises immediately. This time, Karen didn't respond with her usual passive-aggressive barbs. She exploded. Loud, chaotic rants erupted. Accusations of corruption, conspiracies, and neighbors being part of some tech cult. Her voice echoed down the street, prompting people to peek out of windows and open front doors. Alicia, ever the composed one, gently steered her away from the garage. We're calling the police now, Karen. It's over. You need help. Karen stormed off in frustration, but the damage was already done. The neighborhood had seen enough. That evening, the HOA board initiated an emergency online vote, allowing every resident to weigh in on a permanent ban. The outcome wasn't even close. 93% voted to revoke all of Karen's privileges. She was no longer allowed to attend meetings, issue citations, or access shared spaces. But just when we thought the saga had ended, she made one last desperate play. Flyers appeared in every mailbox. Bright yellow sheets with red block letters blaring, "The HOA is lying to you." The content? A wild diatribe filled with rants about mind control drones, government experiments, and how the ATV was a military prototype. She accused me of cybercrimes, claimed Rick was a corporate spy, and insisted Alicia was an undercover federal agent disguised as a landscaper. The neighborhood didn't panic. They laughed. One neighbor turned the flyer into a jigsaw puzzle. Another laminated it for bathroom reading. Someone even mocked up a fake movie poster. Karen, HOA of Shadows, rated K for kooky. Despite the comedy, the board took it seriously and reported her for harassment. A formal cease and desist letter was delivered the next day. Wanting to reset the tone, I hosted a backyard barbecue, open to everyone, casual and welcoming. I even gave a short, light-hearted demo of the infamous ATV. No secrets, no speeches, just food, laughs, and the chance to exhale. It turned into the largest community event we'd had in years. Kids zipped around on mini ATVs while adults swapped Karen stories like war veterans comparing scars. Someone brought a cake shaped like a citation clipboard. Midway through flipping burgers, Alicia pulled me aside and handed me an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from several longtime residents, along with a newly created community commendation. It read, "For patience, peacekeeping, and strategic ATV deployment." I laughed so hard I almost dropped the spatula. But the gesture meant more than I could express. For once, neighborhood conflict hadn't torn us apart. It had brought people closer together. Karen's chaos had accidentally reminded everyone why shared power matters. She left not long after, packed her things quietly in the night and vanished in a rental truck. Word spread she was running for a board position in a newer subdivision. But within days, someone linked to her story on the Entitled People subreddit, name, photo, and all. Her campaign didn't survive the week. As for me, I gave the ATV one final upgrade. It could now detect vocal tone, flag aggressive language, and send early alerts to my phone if anything even approached Karen-level tension. Not out of fear she'd return, just to be ready for the next one. A few weeks later, as a joke, I parked it near the entrance with a cardboard sign, "Smile, facial ID in progress." People laughed, snapped photos, and asked if I'd consider selling them. Maybe someday. But the highlight was when Rick strolled by, clapped me on the back, and said, "I used to think HOA drama was the worst part of living here. Now, thanks to you and that ATV, it's actually kind of fun." I leaned back, a smile tugging at my lips as I looked out over the calm street. For the first time in what felt like ages, I could truly breathe. The silence was peaceful, the ever-present clipboard was nowhere in sight, and the self-appointed neighborhood tyrant had finally lost her grip. But what truly made it special was how we got here. Not through courtrooms or confrontations, but with unity, laughter, and a machine that, oddly enough, brought us all together. She had fancied herself the guardian of order, a visionary of community structure. In reality, she was just an obstacle, a noisy detour that made us all appreciate the journey even more once we passed her. The calm that followed her downfall felt dreamlike. It was as if someone had opened the windows and let out months of stale tension. Gone were the passive-aggressive notices taped to doors, the constant surveillance routines, and the spontaneous HOA meetings that served no real purpose. Life began to find its rhythm again. Children filled the lawns with laughter. Neighbors waved with open smiles instead of whispered suspicions behind shrubbery. Even weekend gatherings resumed without the shadow of someone cataloging plate numbers. Her presence lingered in memory, but her absence was a gift. The quiet wasn't emptiness. It was peace. With a fresh start under new leadership, the HOA finally focused on something meaningful, rebuilding trust and lifting the community spirit. Among the ideas floated, one stood out. A celebration of resilience, humor, and, surprisingly, a hero no one had expected. The idea came from June, the elderly woman who had quietly chronicled our antagonist's odd behavior for over a year. Her suggestion, a day dedicated to the ATV. At first, people chuckled, assuming she was joking. But when the flyers went up, the response was unexpectedly enthusiastic. Families pitched in, kids painted decorations, and someone even secured a bounce house shaped like a tiny engine. When the day came, it felt like the kind of event you only saw in feel-good movies. People who had barely spoken were now bonding over potato salad and tales of absurd HOA fines. Right in the center of the fun stood the ATV, sparkling, tuned up, and ready for photos. Red, white, and blue streamers fluttered from the handlebars, and every hour, it played the Rocky theme like a tiny champ. Kids grinned next to it. Adults asked for a quick ride around the block. I had to keep reminding everyone. It wasn't just a toy, it was a high-tech guardian. What none of us expected was her return. Not dramatically, not confrontationally, just a beige sedan idling across the street. Inside sat the former enforcer of the HOA, sunglasses masking her face, quietly watching from behind the glass. She hadn't been seen since her formal removal. Many believed she had moved far away, started over elsewhere. But here she was, witnessing her legacy redefined without her. People noticed. No one engaged. There were no jeers, no acknowledgement. Just a silent understanding. Her power was gone. Her fear factor dissolved. She was just there. A background shadow in a day filled with light. And after about 20 minutes of being completely ignored, she put her car in gear and drove off, slowly, as though dragging her pride behind her. That was the last we saw of her. Things only got better. The newly elected HOA president, a retired urban planner named Nain, implemented changes that ensured balance and fairness. Rules were now transparent. Voting was done digitally. Every resident had a say. And one of the very first actions? Voiding all the baseless penalties she had handed out. Refunds were issued. Lawn ornaments returned. Even the famously hated pink mailbox came back, freshly painted and more flamboyant than ever. I kept tinkering with the ATV, now more out of enjoyment than necessity. I added solar charging panels, and even programmed a cheerful greeting that used facial recognition. Whenever someone passed, it would chime, *, welcome, friend. Identity confirmed. Neighborhood sanity stable. *, it was silly, but it brought smiles. It wasn't just an ATV anymore. It had earned a new name, Karen Buster. One morning, I found a small basket sitting on its seat. No note, no sender. Just cookies, sparkling cider, and a keychain shaped like a broken clipboard. The message was clear. The community had embraced the full journey, chaos and all. We hadn't just weathered a storm, we had come together because of it. Of course, I wasn't naive. Drama tends to creep back into HOAs sooner or later. Titles attract those who crave control. But now, the neighborhood had learned. People were quicker to question, faster to unite, and not afraid to speak up. We had learned that power comes from participation, not from a title or a loud voice. My weapon of choice had been a bit unorthodox. Some software, a few sensors, and a machine with a grudge. And in the end, it worked. The funniest moment came months later during a routine HOA meeting. Someone casually floated the idea of volunteer neighborhood watch. Rick, who rarely spoke, raised his hand and said with a smirk, "I nominate the ATV." The whole room burst into laughter. We all knew it wasn't a serious proposal, but the appreciation was real. Nain leaned toward me with a grin. "Maybe we should give it voting rights." I couldn't help but laugh. The thing she tried to ban had become the face of our revival. Somewhere, I imagined her ranting in another town, warning newcomers about the robotic menace that toppled her regime. But this wasn't about a machine. Not really. It was about drawing lines, protecting community values, and knowing when to push back. Sometimes the most absurd conflicts shine a light on what really matters. She believed a clipboard and a title made her untouchable. But those things mean nothing when the truth is on tape and the people have had enough. If I regret anything, it's that I didn't add a confetti launcher for the moment she was caught. Maybe that's the next upgrade. Something flashy. Something poetic. Because if there's one thing I've come to believe, it's that justice isn't just about right and wrong. It's about timing, humor, and the occasional off-road vehicle with a grudge. And now, as I sit on my porch watching kids ride past Karen Buster like it's some kind of neighborhood legend, I realize we didn't just fix things, we grew. We're not just safer. We're wiser. We know now, one person with a clipboard doesn't define a community. It's defined by connection, cooperation, and just the right amount of mischief. She may have driven off thinking she'd won, but what she really did was give us a reason to unite. And for that, well, maybe I'm a little grateful. Almost.